Welcome to Betrayal and Revenge. I'm your storyteller, and today I'll take you on a journey of secrets, lies, and payback. Make sure you stay with me until the very end. You won't want to miss how it all unfolds. And when it's over, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let me know what you think. They say trust is built slowly and broken in an instant. That's not true. Sometimes, it dies like a bank account slowly drained in tiny, deliberate transactions, each one invisible, until there's nothing left. I met Evelyn at a conference in Chicago, 6 years ago, almost to the day. I remember the weather more than I remember the keynote speaker. It was March, that slushy in-between season where the wind slices through coats and the city feels like it's holding its breath. She stood out in a red wool coat and black gloves, standing in line for coffee like she didn't notice the chill. Or maybe she just didn't care. That was Evelyn. Always poised, always unfazed. A woman who moved like the world didn't just make space for her. It apologized if it hadn't already. We spoke over espresso and deadlines. She was sharp, quick, ambitious. A strategy consultant with a focus on lean development and exit planning. She made companies look profitable even when they weren't. I found it fascinating. Dangerous, even. But she smiled at me like she'd already run the numbers and liked what she saw. Within 8 months, we were married. The wedding was tasteful, classic, small enough to be intimate, big enough to be featured in a local business magazine's lifestyle section. Power couple spotlight, tech visionary and financial maven tie the knot. The headline made her eyes light up more than the vows did. But I didn't see it then. Back then, I was just proud. I had built a software company from nothing. Bootstrapped, no funding rounds. Just grit, sleepless nights, and a few well-timed pivots. By the time Evelyn stepped into my life, the company had traction, name recognition, a few national clients. But with her at my side, I felt legitimate, complete. And she knew exactly how to play the part. She never pushed. Not really. She just streamlined. She offered to help with the books, suggested we outsource payroll, helped me draft the early documentation for scaling. When I balked at the idea of opening a line of credit to boost cash flow, she showed me projections, trends, case studies. She made it sound like success was just another spreadsheet waiting to be formatted. We became a team. Or at least, that's what I thought. I didn't see the small things, how she started changing passwords for security, how my email stopped syncing automatically, how our joint account had transactions that didn't match the receipts I kept. I assumed the bank lagged in updates. I assumed she had it handled. Then came the late nights, the client dinners, the last-minute flights, the way she started locking her phone even when she was in the shower. When I asked questions, she answered like I was making things up. "Babe, you're stressed. You always get paranoid before tax season." And maybe I was. After all, nothing looked wrong on the surface. We hosted perfect dinner parties. We laughed at the right moments. She kissed me before meetings and made jokes about being the real CEO at home. Everyone loved her. And I loved her too. But love without truth is just branding. And I was about to discover how deep her strategy really went. It started with a charger. Stupid, right? A missing charger. I was packing for a short business trip to Austin. One of those quick fly-in, speak at the panel, fly-out kind of deals. I had a system, duffel bag, laptop case, and my overnight kit all laid out on the bed. But the charger for my MacBook wasn't in its usual pouch. I searched drawers, the office, even under the couch, growing more irritated with every pass. Eventually, I checked Evelyn's home office, not because I thought it would be there, but because I was desperate and already late. I found the charger, all right. But I found something else too. Her laptop was open. Unlocked. A spreadsheet glared back at me like a silent scream. There was my name, several tabs in, alongside assets, business accounts, and property appraisals. I clicked through slowly, the blood draining from my face. The file name was innocuous. Contingency options, Q3. But it wasn't about contingencies. It was about liquidation, separation, exit strategy. And I wasn't the one exiting. My company was listed as primary marital business asset. The document had valuation notes, possible attorney referrals, Even estimated media fallout if she initiated public proceedings. A side note calculated her public narrative advantage, given my past funding history, suggesting a tailored PR rollout if things got messy. There was even a breakdown of how to structure the divorce filing, so it would favor her in court, citing location-based judicial precedents and optimal timing post-audit cycle. My jaw clenched so tight I thought a tooth might crack. I should have felt rage. But all I felt was cold. The kind that crawls up your spine and sits behind your eyes. I backed out of the file, careful not to change anything. The laptop lid clicked shut with a whisper. I stood there, staring at her color-coded folders, wondering how long she'd been planning this. Not wondering if how long. That was the real horror. Because only someone who loves you can plan your destruction in such fine detail. I went on that trip to Austin like nothing was wrong. Sat on stage, smiled into cameras, shook hands with executives I didn't even like. I gave a keynote speech about transparent leadership in turbulent times. The irony wasn't lost on me. But inside something had ruptured. I wasn't running a company anymore. I was a target. A file. A revenue stream someone had plotted to dismantle and repurpose. On the flight back, I didn't sleep. I scrolled through our shared digital storage, through old emails. I found folders she'd labeled wedding planning that contained nothing of the sort. I found expense logs with vendor names I didn't recognize, until I traced them to legal offices and private consultants. There were non-disclosure drafts. Custody projections for children we didn't even have. That's when I realized this wasn't a reaction to an affair. This wasn't impulsive. This was architecture. Quiet, precise demolition of everything I thought was mine. And I began to wonder, what if the affair wasn't the betrayal at all? What if it was just the smoke meant to distract me from the fire she'd already set? What if loving me had only ever been her business plan? When I walked through the door that night, Evelyn was standing in the kitchen barefoot, humming to herself as she poured wine. Pinot Noir, aged, one of the good ones we saved for special nights. She looked up, smiled, tilted her head like she always did when she was trying to look effortless. "You're back early," she said. "I thought you had a dinner thing?" I studied her for a full 3 seconds before answering. Not like a man looking at his wife. Like an analyst observing a subject in the field. Her posture was relaxed. Too relaxed. Not the kind of relaxed you get from trust, but the kind that says I've already won. "They canceled last minute," I said, setting my bag down. "Weather issues." She didn't ask follow-ups. That was her tell. Evelyn asked questions when she cared, when she needed data. But that night, she just sipped her wine and said she'd saved me some dinner. Stir-fry. My favorite. As if seasoning could wash away strategy. We sat. We ate. She made a joke about the neighbor's dog that barked all night. I nodded in the right places. Laughed when she did. But the silence inside me was no longer stunned. It was calculating. Because now I saw everything. The way she spoke like a woman who already practiced this version of herself in the mirror. The tiny pauses between her words, like she was editing the script as she went. The way her left hand kept brushing her necklace. The one she wore to court mediations back when she did consulting for divorces. Like a trophy from another battlefield. She never asked how the trip really went. She didn't need to. She thought she already knew the ending. When she leaned in to kiss me goodnight, I let her. But something in my body had already rejected her warmth like a transplant that didn't match. Her touch felt like paperwork. Like a formality. Like a closeout clause. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The spreadsheet burned into the back of my eyelids. She had planned everything. Calculated angles, legal advantages, even PR optics. She thought the game was already in motion. She believed I would find out, panic, confront, maybe even lash out. She was prepared for messy, for explosive, for emotional. But she had no idea how quiet I could be when I was betrayed. How cold. She thought she had married a builder. But now she'd created a strategist. And I was done reacting. It was time to plan. People think revenge starts with rage. It doesn't. It starts with silence. The kind that slips between words like a knife waiting to be pulled. In the weeks after I discovered Evelyn's plan, I said nothing. Not a syllable out of place. I woke when she woke. ate what she cooked, answered when spoken to, and every time she touched my arm, smiled across the table, or sent me a good luck text before a meeting, I smiled back. But behind my eyes a ledger had opened. I started watching her like she once watched me, only I didn't need spreadsheets or consultants. I had something sharper. The knowledge that she believed I was still blind. Every pattern, every habit, every lie that passed her lips now had context. Her networking brunches on Saturdays, suddenly rebranded as female founder mixers. Her interest in streamlining our finances, suddenly urgent, as if we were bracing for impact. Her phone always face down, always locked, always charged. I made no moves, not yet. I simply collected. First, the passwords. She thought I didn't notice the browser autofills, the sync devices. The moment she typed in her banking info during a wine-fueled Amazon spree, I saw everything. Not just our joint accounts, but hers, offshore hidden, structured under an LLC I'd never heard of. A consulting agency that never consulted, with a quiet trail of deposits, not from work, from liquidation. My liquidation. Next, the lawyer. Not hers, mine. An old college friend turned litigation specialist. I didn't ask for a divorce strategy. Not yet. I asked how one would dismantle a business without alerting its founder. He blinked once, then said, "You mean like a hostile asset shift? That'd take months. Careful timing. Unless someone close to the founder had access." Exactly. I didn't tell him everything. Just enough. I wanted the pieces, not the conclusion. Because conclusions were what Evelyn did. She built narratives. I wanted truth. So I kept watching. I made small changes. I restructured the company's access protocols, quietly. I opened a private account she couldn't see. I met with an M&A advisor under the guise of early expansion interest. Every evening, I came home and kissed the woman planning to bury me. And every night, I lay in bed next to her body and thought about numbers, hers, mine, and the ones that would finally tilt the board in my favor. What she didn't realize was this. You don't outplay someone who's already lost everything once. You just give him time. And I had all the time in the world. Control, I learned, is not about power. It's about perception. So I let her think she was winning. When Evelyn suggested we refinance the house, just in case markets tighten, I nodded. When she asked if she could take over the company's vendor accounts to streamline outgoing payments, I handed her the files. When she said, "Let's talk about diversifying ownership, maybe bring on someone else as a silent partner, just for structure," I said, "You're brilliant as always." She preened under compliments like a cat in a sunbeam. I knew how to feed her. What she didn't know was that every move she made added fuel to the file I was quietly building. I recorded phone calls, not hers, mine, with banks, with compliance auditors, with real estate agents in other states. I wanted to know what assets I could move, what liabilities I could pin, and how fast a company could be transferred, if done by someone who knew how to cloak their footprints. I became a ghost in my own empire. Employees still saw me. Clients still heard me. But every real decision, every dollar of weight, I began shifting sideways, into a new name, a clean LLC, a registered P.O. box in a state that doesn't ask questions. And all the while, Evelyn glowed. She began taking longer showers, wearing lipstick to go get groceries. She hummed around the house more, checked her phone obsessively. When I left for meetings, she barely looked up. Her confidence made her sloppy. One night, after she fell asleep early with a glass of wine still half full beside the bed, I checked her phone. I didn't need to hack anything. Her fingerprint was already mapped to my device from years ago, and she had forgotten to disable it. That's when I saw the messages. Not just one man. 3. Different names, different cities, different threads. One of them sent her a photo from a resort in Tulum, where she was allegedly consulting a biotech firm. Another one called her said he missed that dangerous mind of hers. The third simply sent money. I read through every word. Not with jealousy. Not even with sadness. Just confirmation. Evelyn wasn't cheating. She was networking. Romance was just another vertical in her strategy. Emotional entanglement. another form of capital. And I realized she didn't love anyone. She loved leverage. The next morning, I kissed her forehead before she woke up. "Coffee's on," I whispered. Then I left. But not to the office. I drove to a warehouse on the edge of town, one I'd quietly leased a month ago, under a name no one would recognize. Inside were 2 safes, a disconnected router, and a desk where I now kept physical copies of every asset I intended to reclaim. I wasn't leaving Evelyn. Not yet. I was setting the table. Let her think she was dining alone. Evelyn didn't notice when I stopped logging into our joint bank account. She didn't question why I began forwarding business updates to a different email. And when I told her I'd decided to sign over temporary control of the business for tax simplification, she didn't even blink. That was the real tell. She didn't ask for the control. She waited for me to offer it. Because she knew it would mean more if I believed it was my idea. So I gave her what she wanted, on paper. Behind the scenes, I buried the true structure in a web of silent proxies and silent shares. The business she now controlled was a skin-polished, public hollow. The real company lived elsewhere, under digital layers and shadow structures too complicated for her to trace until it was too late. It wasn't paranoia. It was insurance. And I paid for that insurance in silence. We still had dinners. Still hosted friends. Still smiled for photographs when we visited her sister's baby shower, and posed like the golden couple everyone envied. But I no longer saw a wife. I saw a terminal investor. She didn't love me. She bet on me. And when I stopped being profitable, she began her exit strategy. So I started mine. One evening, while she was out meeting a former mentor, I sat in our living room, opened my laptop, and triggered a scheduled cascade of internal notices. Client portfolio transfers, sub-brand registrations, exit clause activations. The core of my company, every IP license, every profit-bearing partnership, would within 72 hours be legally separated from her reach. She would still hold the title, but the structure beneath it would collapse like scaffolding under fire. When she returned that night, she kissed me on the cheek and poured herself wine. She talked about her mentor like it was a networking session. I asked her if it went well. She smiled and said, "Very." He said I'm underutilizing my brand. I laughed softly. Maybe I am too. And she didn't even hear it. Later that night, as she slept, I sat in my office and watched the cascade finalize. Digital locks clicked. Portfolios vanished from her dashboard. The name remained, but the bones were gone. Evelyn was holding a corpse and smiling. And still I said nothing. Not yet. I wanted her to make the first move, because when she tried to cut me out, she'd realize she had already walked into an empty vault. It happened on a Thursday. She wore her power heels, the black ones with the red soles that clicked like a metronome of dominance. Her blazer was navy, sharp-shouldered, button-tight. Not the kind she wore for clients. The kind she wore for war. She didn't say where she was going. She just smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Don't wait up." I didn't. Because I already knew where she was going. And I already knew what was in that folder she carried under her arm. 2 hours later, I got the email. From her lawyer. Not a confrontation. Not a breakdown. Just a digital document titled Notice of Separation, Intent to Initiate Divorce. It was clinical. Sanitized. A bullet-pointed blueprint of how she intended to peel my life off the bone. She requested immediate cessation of shared accounts, temporary sole control over the business, to avoid financial volatility, and a division of assets based on projected future earning potential. Her lawyer had attached a letter of pre-negotiation. If I complied, things could remain amicable. If not, well, the second attachment was a draft press release. I didn't reply. I didn't panic. I didn't even flinch. Because what Evelyn didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that by the time she filed, she was already suing a shell. The company she claimed was still under her name, registered to an address that hadn't existed in weeks. The accounts she demanded control over, transferred to silent structures in Nevada, overseen by an operations firm with no ties to either of us. The projected earnings she hoped to claim, already rerouted through subsidiaries she never even knew existed. She had filed a declaration against a ghost. And when I walked into the house that evening, she stood in the kitchen waiting for me like a general after a strike. Her smile was thin. "We need to talk." I nodded. "Of course." She began with her script, about how things weren't working, how we'd grown apart, how she wanted a clean break, but hoped we could be civil. She emphasized the word fairness 5 times. I counted. I didn't interrupt. Only when she mentioned the business did I raise a brow. "You mean the shell you still technically hold title over?" I asked calmly. Her smile cracked. Just a flicker. But it was there. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "You will," I replied and handed her a folder of my own. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No threats. Just numbers, dates, transfer records, and a final page with her signature, digitally confirmed, from the night she was with a mentor. She'd authorized the exit without even reading what she signed. "You signed your way out 2 weeks ago," I said. "You just didn't notice." She didn't sit down, didn't speak, just stared, because in that moment Evelyn finally understood. She hadn't married a businessman. She'd married her mirror. And now the reflection was fighting back. Evelyn wasn't used to losing. Not in court. Not in meetings. And especially not at home. So when she realized the ground beneath her was gone, she did what any master manipulator does. She changed tactics. The next morning, the silence in the kitchen wasn't warm or familiar. It was surgical. She didn't speak at first. Just poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of me, sat down across from me like a negotiator coming in for round 2. Only this time, with softer eyes. "Maybe we rush things," she said, her voice carefully low. "I don't want to burn everything down." I didn't answer. She smiled faintly. "You know, I was angry. I thought maybe you didn't trust me. That you were drifting away. I acted defensively. But I've had time to think." She leaned forward slightly, her hand brushing mine. "We built something real. Maybe we don't have to let it fall apart." Her eyes scanned my face, looking for the cracks she used to know so well. But they were gone. The man across the table from her now was no longer wounded, no longer reaching, no longer reactive. I took a sip of coffee, then gently set it down. "What is it you want, Evelyn?" She blinked, caught off guard. "I want to find a way through this without lawyers, without headlines. We can divide things quietly, smoothly, mutually." I nodded slowly. "And what will you divide exactly?" A pause. "The company, the home, our joint accounts." "We don't have joint accounts anymore," I said flatly. She flinched. "You're being cruel." "No," I said. "Just final." Her posture shifted. The soft tactic faltered. She switched again. "You're not thinking clearly. This isn't just about us. It's about reputation. Your clients. Your board. What do you think they'll say when they find out how you've handled this?" I smiled. "They won't. Because I've already told them." I slid a second folder across the table. Copies of emails, time-stamped. A disclosure of restructuring, sent to every major stakeholder weeks ago. All signed off. All accepted. Evelyn wasn't part of those conversations. She was never invited. Her fingers hovered over the folder, but didn't open it. For the first time I saw it. The smallest twitch in her jaw. The first true sign of panic. "You're destroying us," she said, almost a whisper. "No," I said. "I'm just letting the lie die. You were the one keeping it on life support." She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. "This isn't over. You think you're so smart, but I still have lawyers. Friends. Influence." I stood too, but calmly. "Then use them. Just know that you're fighting for something you don't own anymore." And I left her standing there, trembling not with fury, but with something worse. The knowledge that her web so carefully spun had snapped in complete silence. And the man she thought was prey had already walked out of it. It took her 4 days to realize she couldn't beat me in silence. So she chose noise. It started with whispers, calls from mutual friends, distant colleagues, subtle questions masked as concern. "Hey, everything okay between you two? We just heard something odd. Thought we'd check." Then came the articles. Not front page, not obvious. Just soft launches, opinion pieces, anonymous industry insights questioning my leadership. One quoted a close source claiming I'd made reckless moves with shared assets. Another implied I'd used emotional manipulation to force my wife out of the business she helped build. The narrative wasn't direct. It didn't need to be. It was surgical like her. She hadn't filed a lawsuit. She'd filed a story. And that story moved faster than fact. By the end of the week, 2 clients called to pause their contracts. An investor asked for an emergency meeting. My inbox began to fill with passive-aggressive questions from people I used to call allies. Evelyn, of course, said nothing. She simply smiled across the table, wore silk again to breakfast, and sent emails late into the night with that same satisfied hum she used to have when closing a deal. But I didn't react. Because 3 weeks earlier, I'd hired a crisis management team. I didn't just anticipate the noise. I built a firewall against it. The press she'd used? Already being investigated for unethical sourcing in a separate scandal. The investors she whispered to? They were already briefed, with documentation, recordings, and time-stamped logs of every restructuring move, every financial transfer, every digital signature, including hers. The house. Transferred to a blind trust. My position? Unshakable. Now held under a controlling vote board she wasn't part of. She threw fire. But I'd already taken the oxygen. So when she marched into my office the following Monday, eyes blazing, holding her phone like a smoking gun and saying, "You're killing my name," I simply said, "You did that the day you bet on my failure." She froze. Because this wasn't theater anymore. "You think you're untouchable?" she hissed. "No," I said. "Just ready." I turned my screen to her. Showed her the public filing. A full exposé prepared by my team. Names redacted. Timelines clean. No slander. Just truth. "I haven't released it yet," I said. "Because I'm not here to ruin you. I'm just done being ruined." She stared at the screen. Then at me. No fire this time. No manipulation. Just the realization that the game was over. Because it was never a game. It was a test. And she failed at the moment she mistook silence for surrender. There's a strange kind of silence that follows a finished war. Not peace. No, that would imply healing. This was emptier. The kind of silence that hums beneath ash after the fire's done feeding. That's where Evelyn stood now. And I didn't have to lift a single match. The fallout of her smear campaign unraveled faster than even I predicted. The opinion pieces? Quietly retracted after the publication faced legal pressure for unverified sources. The leaked stories? Proven to be traceable to an anonymous account registered to a VPN she forgot I'd set up for her laptop years ago. Her lawyer dropped her. The close friends, who once entertained her calls, stopped responding altogether. One of them forwarded me her last message by mistake. "He's making me disappear. And I don't even know how." That's when I knew I had won. Not because I ruined her, but because she couldn't even recognize the moves I made. I stopped showing up at the house 2 weeks after that. No fight. No explanation. Just absence. My side of the closet cleared. My toothbrush gone. My desk empty. No letter. Only silence. I had relocated. The new city didn't know Evelyn. Didn't know what we were. Didn't know how many nights I lay next to someone who rehearsed affection like a speech. I built a new office. Smaller. Cleaner. Mine. Clients followed without hesitation. She tried to reach out once. A voicemail. "You win. I hope you're happy now." I didn't save it. Because winning wasn't the goal. Erasure was. She had weaponized her charm, her body, her narrative. She danced in rooms while I worked in shadows. She told the world I was cruel while she sank her teeth into everything I'd built. But in the end, no one remembered her name. The business bore a new title. The press a new focus. The home, sold. The proceeds locked in a fund she could never touch. I left her exactly what she tried to leave me with. Nothing. Except a name on paper. And silence. And the worst part? There's no one left to blame. Because you can't fight a man who's already gone. Evelyn used to be the woman everyone remembered in a room. Now she was the echo people couldn't place. Her friends stopped asking. Her family stopped defending. People stopped calling because no one likes a story without a villain. And I had taken that role with me when I disappeared. It didn't happen all at once. First, it was the silence after the voicemail. Then, the lawyer who told her I'd decline mediation. Then, the finance firm who notified her that her name had been removed from the trust holding the remainder of the house profits, per the protective clause signed at acquisition. In the smallest fine print. She began showing up in places I used to go. Our favorite restaurant, the gym we both joined when we first got married, the coffee shop we'd once claimed as ours. Not to run into me. To feel close to the idea of me. Because that's all she had left. Not me. My absence. And absence has teeth. It chews through pride. It swallows bravado. It echoes in rooms that used to hold two people's breath. I received a package one day, no sender, but I didn't need one. Inside a photo album. Us. Paris. The coast. Our first apartment. Her parents' backyard wedding. Each picture captioned by hand. Every smile underlined with dates. She thought maybe nostalgia could anchor me. I burned the album the same night. Not out of rage. Not out of hate. Out of mercy. Because I wouldn't give her even that. Not the comfort of pain. Not the illusion of relevance. I had become a void in her world. And the more she reached into it, the more it swallowed. She posted a photo online a week later. Captioned simply, "Sometimes you don't realize you lost everything until even your memories stop answering." That was the moment I knew. I was no longer her opponent. I was her silence. And silence never loses. There's a kind of freedom that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't scream victory. It doesn't raise flags. It just is. It wakes you up without weight on your chest. It lets you walk past places that once hurt without flinching. It lets you hear her name and feel nothing. That's what I felt the morning I finalized the final document. No lawyers. No signatures. Just a digital confirmation that all residual assets had been cleared. She had nothing of mine. And I had nothing of hers. We weren't just divorced. We were erased. There were no more updates. No more emails. No threats. No negotiations. No ghosts. Just quiet. I moved again. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to feel a place untouched by her fingerprints. No shared past. No knowing glances from mutual friends. No lingering questions. The new apartment was small. Clean. White walls. Tall windows. Some days I sat on the floor, coffee in hand, staring into the morning haze, thinking of absolutely nothing. And that was the gift. She had stolen so much from me. Time, loyalty, plans, the comfort of a shared future. But what she gave me, unintentionally, was rarer. The self I never protected. I began to build again. Not a company. Not a brand. Me. I picked up books I used to ignore. Learned to cook properly. Started jogging. Not because I had to, but because I liked how the wind felt on my skin at 6 a.m. I smiled without an audience. And for the first time in years, I laughed without wondering if it made me weak. Evelyn faded not because I buried her, but because I outgrew her. She remained somewhere, still telling a story that no longer had a listener. And I walked forward. Not victorious, but free. It didn't hit me all at once. There was no final crescendo, no shattering epiphany, no dramatic walk into a golden sunrise. It happened slowly, quietly, like breath returning to lungs that had long forgotten how to expand fully. I didn't realize I was free until I caught myself standing at the kitchen counter one morning, coffee cooling between my palms, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and noticing, with a strange clarity, that I hadn't thought of her name in days. That realization didn't bring euphoria. It brought stillness, a quiet so deep it felt almost foreign. For months, even after the last document was signed, I had carried her voice in my head like background noise, not loud, not sharp, just persistent. But now it was gone. No whispers. No inner rewrites of arguments. No imagined confrontations. Just silence. I moved through the apartment slowly, as if testing this new dimension where she no longer lived, even in memory. The empty picture frames I hadn't bothered to take down no longer looked hollow. They looked neutral. The space no longer echoed with absence. It just existed. And I existed inside it, not as a shadow of the man she broke, but as someone finally out of the fog she created. People always imagine revenge as a blaze, an inferno that scorches the enemy until nothing is left but ash. But true revenge is colder. It's the unbothered breath you take when they try to provoke you and you feel nothing. It's walking past the restaurant where you once sat across from them, and not even remembering what you ate. It's when their name tastes like dust in your mouth, dry, flavorless, irrelevant. She had tried to tear me apart. And for a time, she had succeeded. She had bent my world, skewed my perception, painted me as a villain in a story she crafted with surgical precision. But the beautiful thing about stepping out of someone's narrative is realizing they no longer get to write the ending. That's mine now. I began reclaiming my rituals, not in rebellion, but in rhythm. A book by the window at night. Jazz in the morning. A walk to the park with no destination. I wasn't trying to be someone new. I was simply becoming someone true. Piece by piece, with no hurry. One evening, I got a message from someone who had known both of us. Not a friend, not an enemy, just an old presence. It said, "I ran into her the other day. She looks so lost. Like she's still waiting for something." I didn't reply. Because I had no more to say. Not to her. Not about her. Some things don't deserve an echo. The real change wasn't external. My apartment was still modest, the same pale walls, the same view of the quiet street below. My schedule hadn't drastically altered either. Same coffee shop, same route to work, same books piled unevenly on the side table. But everything felt different now. I no longer moved through my days like a man waiting for something to end. I moved like someone who had survived what tried to consume him. For so long, I had kept pieces of her hidden in the corners of my routines. I avoided certain playlists. I hesitated to wear shirts she used to compliment. I skipped meals we once shared just to avoid the weight of a memory served with them. But grief becomes exhausting when it outstays its usefulness. And I was done feeding it. The first time I laughed, genuinely, fully, was over something stupid. A dropped carton of eggs and a sarcastic joke I muttered to myself in the silence of my kitchen. But I laughed. And then I laughed again because I realized I didn't feel guilty about it. I wasn't betraying some imaginary grief contract. I was just human again. I stopped measuring my progress by how often I thought of her. That's a trap no one warns you about, tracking your own healing like a scoreboard. Some days I still woke up with a shadow in my chest. Some nights I still saw flickers of her in strangers' gestures. But the difference now? I didn't chase those feelings. I let them pass, like weather. I started seeing someone. Not intentionally. We met at a bookstore, cliché I know. She asked about the novel in my hand, and we talked about stories instead of scars. She didn't know my history, and I didn't offer it. It wasn't about hiding the past. It was about not handing it over as my introduction. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by the worst thing that had happened to me. She had warm eyes and laughed without checking if I was amused. She wasn't trying to fix me or impress me, just be with me. And I realized I didn't need someone who could heal me. I needed someone who didn't reopen the wounds. There were moments early on where I felt the panic rise, guilt, fear, echoes of manipulation. But she never weaponized my hesitation. She waited. Not patiently, just naturally, like someone who didn't expect pain to be currency. One night, I told her everything. Not as a confession, not as a test, just because I didn't want her to imagine ghosts where there were none. She listened. And when I was done, she said nothing for a long while. Then she said, "You're still here. That's the part one care about." And that was it. No questions. No judgment. Just acceptance. I think that's what healing actually is. Not forgetting the person who broke you, but becoming someone they can no longer reach. Some days, I still walk by the mirror and catch the eyes of a man I don't fully recognize. Not because he's unfamiliar, but because he's whole. There was a time when my reflection looked tired, cautious, like it was waiting to be ambushed by a memory. Now, there's no hesitation, no flinch, only a calm that doesn't beg to be seen. I didn't become stronger because of what she did to me. That's the lie we often tell ourselves to justify pain. Growth doesn't come from betrayal. It comes from what you do after you survive it. And I had survived. Evelyn's name came up in a conversation once. A friend from the past, someone who hadn't realized how scorched the earth had been. I think she's teaching yoga now, they said, half laughing, half shrugging. Still looks like she's trying to prove something. I nodded, smiled. Didn't ask more. Because it didn't matter. You know you're healed when you stop needing closure from the one who hurt you. And she would never give it. Not because she couldn't, but because she still didn't understand what she did wrong. She would carry her own version of the story forever, telling it to whoever would listen, crafting herself as the misunderstood, the mistreated, the one who gave too much. But I no longer lived inside her narrative, and she no longer existed inside mine. I never blocked her on anything. That surprised even me. I just stopped looking, because the final stage of letting go isn't destruction. It's indifference. My life now is quiet, not boring, peaceful. I don't measure success by how far I've come from her, but by how little she factors into anything that matters. I wake up early, drink my coffee slow. Sometimes I write things I never show anyone. Not about her. Just about how good silence feels when no one's using it against you. She once told me I'd never find someone who loved me like she did. She was right. I never will. Because love should never feel like debt. And I owe her nothing now. Not even the memory. Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to Betrayal and Revenge, give us a like, and hit the bell so you won't miss new tales. Share your thoughts in the comments. I value your feedback. See you in the next stories of Betrayal and Revenge.